The peaceful and content life of a devout Christian family of 5 took an unforeseen turn one fateful night. In this remarkable tale, we'll delve into the extraordinary story of Amanda and Billy Cope and the profound impact it had on their family. Prepare to embark on a journey marked by a grievous miscarriage of justice, replete with unexpected plot twists and intricate complexities. Let's begin. It was November 29th, 2001, in Rock Hill, South Carolina, when 37-year-old Billy Cope discovered the lifeless body of his daughter, Amanda, in her bedroom during the early hours of the morning. At around 3 a.m., Billy abruptly woke up, sensing that something was amiss within his household. Notably, the hallway light was illuminated, despite his recollection of having turned it off before retiring to bed. His wife, Mary Sue, was away at her overnight job, leaving Billy alone with their 3 daughters, Amanda, aged 12, Jessica, aged 11, and Kyla, aged 7. Being a devoutly Christian family, they had foregone their usual Wednesday church service that night to assist Jessica with her math homework. Amanda, the caring older sister, had offered her help, and Billy consented to allow the girls to stay up until their task was complete. The youngest daughter, Kyla, had retired to bed at 9 p.m., while Billy stayed up with the 2 older girls until 1 a.m., assisting them with their schoolwork. Subsequently, everyone retired to bed, with Billy utilizing a CPAP breathing machine to manage his sleep apnea. Strangely, just 2 hours later, Billy was startled awake. In a drowsy state, he proceeded to check on his daughters. Finding Amanda's door closed, he speculated that she might have been the one to switch on the hallway light, possibly having risen for a drink of water. The door to the other bedroom was open, revealing a peaceful slumber of his 2 younger daughters. Feeling somewhat reassured, Billy returned to his bed, reattached his breathing machine, and promptly fell back asleep. The following morning, at 6 a.m., he was rudely awakened by the blaring of his alarm clock. He later mentioned that during the intermittent moments of sleep, he had dreamt about the rapture. In his dream, Jesus had come to gather his followers, and he witnessed Amanda being taken, while he was left behind, bidding her farewell with the words, "Bye, Daddy." Still shaken from the intensity of his dream, Billy hastened to check on his daughters. The sight of his younger girls still peacefully asleep in their beds initially brought him relief, but it was short-lived. When he attempted to open Amanda's door, it became entangled with the closet door, requiring force to gain entry. In that harrowing moment, he was confronted with an unbearable scene: Amanda's lifeless body lying motionless on her bed. As he reached out to touch her, he felt the chilling coldness, confirming his worst nightmare. In a state of shock, he covered her lifeless form and, overwhelmed with grief, dialed 911.
Is she breathing?
Oh, no, she's dead.
She's
cold as a cucumber, and
okay, you don't want to try to CPR or anything on her?
no, ma'am, she's dead. I mean, her mouth is completely shut. She's ice cold.
In his initial statement to the police, Billy Cope recounted that he woke up around 6 a.m., called out his daughter's name, and upon receiving no response, decided to check on her. It was during this check that he tragically discovered his daughter's lifeless body on the floor of her own bedroom and promptly called 911 for assistance. Based on the absence of signs of forced entry and what they perceived as a lack of emotional display, the police considered Cope a suspect. He underwent 2 interviews before being released, only to be brought in for a 3rd session later that same night, which extended into the following morning and ultimately resulted in Cope's imprisonment. Throughout more than 24 hours of persistent interrogation, Cope maintained his innocence, despite voluntarily waiving his Miranda rights and offering to undergo a polygraph test on 5 separate occasions. Following an overnight stay in jail, he was subjected to a polygraph examination the next morning, which he successfully passed. However, the officers informed him that he had failed the polygraph, leading to the continuation of the interrogation. Astonished, devastated, and bewildered by the results, Cope questioned aloud whether it was possible to commit such a horrific crime and have no recollection of it, a notion that the interrogator had previously suggested. Overwhelmed, Cope broke down and confessed to the crime, stating, "I must have done it." He proceeded to provide a detailed account of how he molested and strangled his daughter. This initial confession was sealed. 2 days later, Cope provided the police with a second written confession in which his story had changed. He now claimed that he had raped and killed his daughter while dreaming about an ex-girlfriend who had undergone an abortion. In compliance with the police, Cope returned to the house to reenact the events of that tragic night. Subsequently, the police drafted a comprehensive, detailed narrative of the murder, which Cope signed, constituting his third confession. However, the evidence did not align with Cope's confessions. Dr. Maynard, the physician who performed Amanda's autopsy, disclosed the presence of bite marks on the child's right breasts, and semen was found in her pants, indicating evidence of sexual assault. Both samples were tested and did not match Cope. Instead, they matched James Sanders, a sex offender residing across the street who had previously committed similar crimes. Yet, within days of receiving the results, the police falsely informed Cope's wife that the semen matched her husband's perfectly. Desperate to extract another confession, the police went through extreme lengths, even wiring Cope's wife and sending her to jail. Nonetheless, Cope did not confess. Tragically, Cope's wife passed away during surgery, unaware of the deception that had torn their world apart. Despite a detailed confession lacking supporting evidence, the prosecutor accused Cope of conspiracy, alleging that he had exploited his daughter by involving Sanders. This accusation primarily relied on Cope's confession and the absence of signs of forced entry. During the trial, the prosecutors relied on a female friend of Cope's late wife as their primary source of evidence. She claimed to have received 2 handwritten notes from Cope confessing to the crime. However, Cope denied writing these notes, and it was determined that he did not have access to the materials used or match the handwriting attributed to him. Additionally, the credibility of the witness was questionable, as she had previously faced forgery charges, rendering this evidence inadmissible. To support his defense, Cope presented expert testimony from Dr. Sal Casson, who discussed false confessions. Dr. Casson argued that the interrogation techniques employed by the police were unethical and should be dismissed. Specifically, 5 inappropriate tactics were highlighted. False evidence. Officers falsely informed Cope that he had failed the polygraph despite him actually passing the test. Positive confrontation. Offers asserted their belief that Cope was guilty. Refusal to accept denial. Despite Cope's cooperation with the polygraph and waiver of an attorney, the officers disregarded his denial of guilt. Minimization. Officers suggested that the crime may have been accidental. Interrogation under duress. Cope was questioned while traumatized and fatigued. Dr. Casson referenced similar cases of false confessions, such as those of Peter Riley and Gary Gager, who confessed to crimes they did not commit after being falsely led to believe they were guilty due to polygraph results. However, the court ruled that these cases were irrelevant to the present trial and deemed the testimony inadmissible. Although Sanders had a history of committing rapes and killings in a manner similar to the victim in this case, the court refused to admit evidence of his previous crimes, as evidence of other crimes is typically not admissible to determine the defendant's character. The testimony of James Hilly, a convicted burglar, claimed to recognize Sanders' distinct voice from overhearing him in prison, bragging about getting away with raping and killing a young girl in the Rock Hill area. However, this testimony was deemed irrelevant since it did not provide specific details about the time or location of the alleged confession. In the end, prosecutors asserted that Cope knowingly permitted James Sanders, his neighbor, to enter his home with the intention of attacking his daughter. They further claimed that Cope himself had previously assaulted the girl. Consequently, both Cope and Sanders were convicted of murder and handed life sentences without the possibility of parole. Cope's defense attorneys contended that the prosecution had manipulated the evidence to wrongfully imprison an innocent man. They argued that Cope, who suffered from mental issues, was so emotionally devastated by his daughter's death that the investigators were able to exploit him into confessing to a crime he did not commit. However, the state Supreme Court upheld Cope's conviction in 2013, and the case was subsequently declined by the U.S. Supreme Court. Cope's defense attorney expressed their profound disappointment in their inability to secure his release from prison, considering him a married father of 3. In a statement shared on the Facebook page, Free Billy Wayne Cope, they wrote, "Billy's death marks a sad end to a horrible miscarriage of justice." Prosecutors maintained that the Cope residence in Rock Hill was securely locked when 12-year-old Amanda was discovered strangled to death, suggesting that someone must have granted Sanders access. In response, the defense attorneys argued that the lock on the home's door could easily be manipulated with a credit card or driver's license. In a statement to the Daily News, Cope's defense team expressed their deep disappointment at their inability to save him from this tragic fate, considering it one of the most profound letdowns of their lives and careers. Cope passed away in prison at the age of 53 in 2017 due to natural causes, steadfastly maintaining his innocence until the end. The core issue in Cope's trial is not whether an innocent man was wrongly convicted, although there is a strong possibility of his innocence based on available evidence. The undeniable victim in this case is Amanda Cope. The main problem lies in the coercive interrogation tactics employed by the police officers, which ultimately resulted in Cope's confession. These techniques, while deceitful and inappropriate, are legally permissible. Despite their ethical concerns, they do not violate the law. Consequently, Cope's confession could not be dismissed, since these techniques are not illegal. Coupled with the circumstantial evidence presented, his confession alone was sufficient for a conviction of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Before concluding, please consider liking this video if you found it enjoyable, and subscribe to our channel for future content. We also encourage you to share your thoughts on whether you believe Billy was innocent or not in the comment section down below.